The first one that I hear a lot is that you cannot, if you file for bankruptcy, you cannot get credit again for 10 years. And that's just simply not accurate. The credit card industry a long time ago realized that they can't make any money off of you if you don't owe them money. And so when you file bankruptcy and you clear the slate of your debt, the credit card industry actually wants to get you back into debt because, again, that's how they make their money. They don't initially allow you unsecured credit cards. You start out, generally speaking, with secured credit cards where you deposit some money into a savings account and they give you up to triple that as a credit limit. And then you take that out every month and you spend that on, use that card to spend on your normal expenses, gas, food, things like that, and pay it off at the end of the month. And if you do that for a period of a year and a half to 2 years, at the end of a year and a half to 2 years, typically they'll refund you back your security deposit and you now have an unsecured credit card with them. And you are eligible for the best interest rates and loan to value ratios out there when you want to buy big ticket items like cars, etc. There are lenders that will lend you money to buy a car right after you file bankruptcy, literally within days of filing bankruptcy, albeit at a bit of a higher interest rate. But it's certainly not true that you cannot get credit for 10 years. Again, the credit industry wants you back in debt as deep as possible because that's how they make their money. And they will welcome you back with open arms once the bankruptcy is over. Another myth that I hear, people who are struggling with their home mortgage payments, is that foreclosure is better than bankruptcy, that they'd rather lose their house through foreclosure than file for bankruptcy. And that's just simply not true. Mortgage underwriters look at foreclosures on real estate pretty negatively when you look to buy a house in the future. And they realize that if you file bankruptcy and for whatever reason, you were forced to file for bankruptcy protection, but you kept your mortgage current, then they tend to look more favorably down the road. But if you are facing foreclosure, then the better move is to file the bankruptcy to buy you time, and then you can actually arrange for a short sale with the lender. And we've had hundreds of clients over the years go through this process. And a short sale is always a better option than foreclosure on a credit report. And a lot of times people come to us right on the eve of sale. Their house is selling within a few days. And so we may file an emergency bankruptcy filing to stop that foreclosure sale, allowing them to do an orderly sale of the property through the short sale process. And then they can also move out in an orderly fashion rather than facing eviction and things like that. So if you're faced with foreclosure, often bankruptcy is the better option to give you the time to be able to move out of the property and to transfer the property in an orderly way so that your credit is not affected as much. Another myth that I often hear is that if you file bankruptcy, everybody's going to know about it. And a lot of people don't want their friends and family to know about the bankruptcy. Bankruptcy filings are not published in the newspaper. At least in California, they're not published in the newspaper. So you do not have to worry about your friends and family knowing about it. In fact, the only people who get notified of a bankruptcy are you and your creditors, the people you owe money to. It's not going to be out there for public consumption. Now, bankruptcy filings are a matter of public record. And what that means is that if somebody wanted to know if you filed bankruptcy, they could go down to the bankruptcy court and go through the records and see your file. But the reality is that people just don't do that. The only people that are going to be notified are you and the people that you owe money to. Your landlord's not going to know, your coworkers are not going to know, your friends and family are not going to know unless you decide to tell them. So this is a relatively private experience, even though it is a matter of public record. Another myth that I often hear is that your business can file bankruptcy without you personally, the business owner, filing for bankruptcy. And this is a myth that is a little bit more complicated than just giving a yes or no answer. Bankruptcy really, at least Chapter 7 bankruptcy, where you're looking to close the business, bankruptcy doesn't really provide much protection for the business. So it is often the case that we advise clients to not file bankruptcy for their business. There are rare instances where it might make sense, but the truth is that more often than not, it doesn't make sense for a business that is closing to file for bankruptcy protection. Where the interesting part in all this lies is where the owners of the business have personally guaranteed the debt of the business. And often what ends up happening is it's the owners of the business that have to file personal bankruptcy to get rid of the obligations that they have for the business. So a business can file bankruptcy without the owners. If the owners haven't personally guaranteed anything, then there may be reasons why the business wants to file. But even in that situation, often we'll tell business owners not to file the business bankruptcy. But more often than not, what usually ends up happening is small, especially in small new businesses, the owners have personally guaranteed the debt. It might be an office lease, it might be property lease, equipment leases, whole number of different types of things that owners will personally guarantee. And so when they break those leases or they have to turn back the equipment early on a lease, they are personally liable for the debt, and a personal bankruptcy will take care of that. Another myth is that by filing bankruptcy, you're somehow irresponsible with your finances. And again, this is something that we hear quite a bit as a myth out there about bankruptcy, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So let's talk about who actually files bankruptcy. These are not people who are running around spending money recklessly. Almost everybody who files for bankruptcy was doing just fine in their financial lives, paying their bills, spending within their means, until some unforeseen or unplanned for accident or event happens in their lives. That could be a divorce, it could be the loss of a job, it could be a medical emergency, it could be an accident, it could be a whole host of things that all of a sudden sends the family finances in a tailspin. And it's not something that anybody could have planned for in most cases. And so as a result, there's pressure put on the finances, and bankruptcy usually becomes the answer. So rather than thinking of bankruptcy as something that is for people who are irresponsible, we consider bankruptcy as an option to really help people get past that event and be able to pick themselves up off the canvas, brush themselves off, and move forward with their lives in the responsible manner they were prior to whatever the event was. So no, people who file bankruptcy are not irresponsible with their finances. They're just unfortunate or may have run into some bad luck. And the good news is that bankruptcy is there to help them get past that event. And like I said, get on with their lives.